My name's Marc Dunkelman. I'm a fellow at Brown University's Watson Institute. I just came out with a new book called Why Nothing Works. So I moved to Providence in 2013 and I began commuting into a job in New York. And when I was commuting at one point, I was rereading this classic 1974 written book, The Power Broker by Robert Caro, which has become this classic tale of how power comes to abuse almost inevitably. Robert Moses had this incredible power to knock down huge portions of the South Bronx in the 1950s to build the Cross Bronx Expressway, despite everyone saying no. But I was taking the train into Penn Station, and I thought to myself at the time, I'd remembered 20 years earlier conversations about building a great Penn Station, replacing Madison Square Garden, having a real gateway that was appropriate to the globe's financial capital. And here we were almost 20 years later, and nothing had happened. And so I thought to myself, how is it that 50 years earlier, 60 years earlier, Robert Moses had been able to do a project with everyone saying no, and now no one opposed the idea of a new Penn Station. We weren't able to begin even a project to which almost everyone said yes. So I wrote Why Nothing Works to make three separate arguments. The first is the progressivism, as we generally understand it, is actually this strange marriage of two separate and competing impulses. The first, which I call Hamiltonian, is an impulse to take power where it is and to move it up into some centralized institution that can solve some tragedy to the common. We can't get a sewer system built, we need to do more parks or more housing. Somebody needs to take power as it's distributed and put it in a centralized institution that can provision that good for everyone. No individual can actually build the sewer system. Someone needs to choose where the pipes are going to go. At the same time, progressivism has a second impulse, which I call Jeffersonian. And the Jeffersonian impulse is to say, there is some institution in our lives that is coercing individuals to do things they don't want to do. So we want to push power down to individuals so they can make choices for themselves, absent government coercion. These two impulses have been part of the progressive tradition from the very beginning in the late 1800s. And they've existed, this is the second argument, in a sort of a yin and yang fashion. At certain times we've been Hamiltonian in our impulse, sometimes we've been more Jeffersonian. The big pivot, in my view, happens in the 1960s. In the previous eras, from really the beginning of the 20th century through the 1960s, progressives are generally inclined to Hamiltonian solutions to big problems. So the classic example is the Tennessee Valley Authority, which is this powerful institution that is given the authority by the Roosevelt administration to basically remake the Upper South, to dam rivers, to extend power to poor farmers from whom the private utilities have no interest in serving. And so there's a leader of the Tennessee Valley Authority, a guy named David Lilienthal, a Wisconsin lawyer, who was given incredible power to make all sorts of decisions using a federal workforce to dam rivers, to extend wires, to reforest barren land, and he accomplishes a great deal. By the late 1960s, the interest in having centralized power like that has completely waned after the Vietnam War, the counterculture, second wave feminism, civil rights movement. By the end of Watergate, faith among progressives in centralized power has fallen to a new low. And so we begin a 50-year process of trying to put new guardrails around power. And you can see that in all sorts of circumstances. The National Environmental Policy Act is sort of the classic one that people are talking about now, but in historic preservation, in new environmental statutes, in a whole series of legislative changes that give more people standing to sue when they don't like something, in public interest law firms. In all these cases, what we're trying to do is create vetoes in the system so that powerful establishment figures can't abuse us anymore. And that's the beginning of the Jeffersonian movement. And then the third argument of the book is that this change from a Hamiltonian to a Jeffersonian approach has rendered government incompetent, and incompetent government is, in the end, an invitation to strongman politics. So the question is, do we need to take a different approach to the way we think about public authority? Is there some happy medium between letting a figure like Robert Moses, who tore down lots of New York City with almost no one being able to tell him no in the 1950s and 60s, to a situation today where we almost can't get any project done expeditiously? Is there some way where we can find a compromise in the two, where everyone has a voice in every issue, but no one has a veto.